Welcome to the English Homemaker podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things home, a realistic but fresh view of homemaking from the suburbs of the south of England. I'm your host, Alyssa Evelyn. Welcome to episode 8 of the English Homemaker. Hello everyone. Did you know that the hardest thing about a podcast and recording a podcast is always starting it? I always start it many times over because I always have so much energy when I sit down to podcast, and I want to always reflect to you how I really feel inside, but not always does my mouth match my brain, and not always do the things come out right. I was trying to tell my mum the other day how sometimes this podcast, when I listen back to it, sounds quite kind of formulaic, and often that's because I record it 4 times over and I'm sort of like repeating myself many times. And I remember in the first episode, actually, I said that I didn't want to do that. I didn't want it to be hugely highly edited, and I wanted it to be a bit more like kind of free and open and okay to make mistakes and mumble and fumble, and to reflect the true side of my personality that is a bit more awkward, I suppose. So I'm going to try that a bit today. And perhaps it will sound awkward, and perhaps that will make some of you feel awkward, and perhaps some of you it will make feel like you're normal, because I don't really sound always hugely put together. Anyway, I am here today with the final episode of the season, the series 1 of the English Homemaker. I am so excited to have been podcasting. I have so enjoyed basically every single minute of it, even editing out my brother's ums on the last episode, of which there are a few, and even re-recording myself many times saying something silly about can openers. I have really loved learning and sharing in this way, and I found it amazing for growing myself, not just in the kind of capacity in the kind of technical aspects of learning how to podcast, but every time I've done an episode, I've done a bunch of research behind it. I've really given it some deep thought. I've put in question times when I was doing the interview with my brother, and I've just really, really enjoyed it. I really feel like I'm going on a personal journey, and I kind of hope you're coming along with me for the ride. I guess part of this whole podcasting idea when I started it was that I really wanted, I was already in love with homemaking, but I wanted to get rid of some of the fluff, this kind of things that society say that we need to be or we should be, and I just wanted to get rid of that. I wanted that weight of society and social media. I wanted that off other people's shoulders because I felt it so heavy on my own. So I do hope that you are feeling a bit that way. I'm sorry if in any way, in any of the podcasts I've done, you've ever felt the opposite way. And do know that my intentions are good and pure, and I never want you to feel like you need to do more in your life in order to be okay and acceptable. So originally I was planning on every season being 10 episodes, and as it turns out, I didn't really plan that all the way through, because realistically I would be then recording during the summer holidays, and when push came to shove, I just really wanted to spend that time with my kids. So I want to say sorry, not sorry, but I think 8 is pretty good. We've covered a good few months in that time, and I shall be back with you at the end of September, beginning of October. I'm not totally sure which date yet, but you will be sure to find out. If you're subscribed, it will just come and pop up at the end of September. And I'm just really, really excited. I've got 2 guests lined up who I'm so excited to talk to and share their brains with you. And I know you're going to really love them, because I cannot wait. I don't know how we're going to make it only an hour long of conversation, because I'm sure I could speak to either of those ladies for ages and ages. So I am going to talk today about a bunch of random different things. I've written down a bunch of notes over the last few weeks of things I want to talk to you about. It really is kind of a bit of a mishmash today. I've got a few quotes to share with you as usual. But the place I really want to start this episode is on questions I got on my Instagram stories. I asked on @the_English_Homemaker on Instagram, asked what questions you would like for a kind of like Q&A section of this podcast, and I got a couple, so I will share the questions and kind of try and give a bit of an answer to them. So the first one is benefits it has on being a homemaker for children and husband. I feel like this is a question that I kind of get in lots of different ways, whether it's not a direct question, but perhaps kind of like a subtle hint that this is kind of behind the question. I think there's a generation of people that for sure think that being at home is super important and super valuable. I think there's also a generation of people who think that it's super important to work and show your children that you work. And I feel like so many women are caught in between, and some feel very strongly one way or the other. Some are just a bit kind of like on the fence and not quite sure. And I kind of want to offer a little bit of freedom, and something that's been helping me a lot in the last few months and years, that Anne of Green Gables quote, which is, "You can nearly always enjoy things if you make up your mind firmly that you will." And that inherently just means that you can actually enjoy anything that's in front of you if you make up your mind that you will. And it's so unbelievably true that it can get some people in a huge pickle in, they've made up their mind that they will stay in a situation that they shouldn't be in, etc., etc. But the mind is a very, very powerful thing. And if we take on board that we are a full-time homemaker, we embrace it, we say, yes, that's what we're going to do. We'll take the financial hit. And, we won't be keeping up with the Joneses, or perhaps we say that it's the other way around. We will go to work and we will work really hard for our family. We will show our children that a career is really important to us, and we will provide for the family, and we will balance everything outside of that, and we will use family help. And there are just so many different ways of doing life. There is no wrong way or right way. And I don't want to get into the kind of idea that the world has that we have to be like extreme on one end or the other. I don't think it has to be that. I think there can be a lovely middle ground, and quite frankly, that middle ground is huge. And everybody I know that has sent me a message, or who I know in real life, or however it looks, has left me a comment, I know you are all doing it in so many different ways, and you're all in different phases of life. And some of you with young children are taking a career break. Some of you who have got older children that have left home, who are traveling the world. I know some of you are just about to not end their career, but take a very significant step back from their career and move into being at home. And it can look so many different ways. But the most important thing is that you embrace what's in front of you. Because if we spend our whole lives dreaming that we could be a full-time homemaker, or that we could be in work, or we could be somewhere other than where we are, we're going to spend the rest of our lives just being disappointed. And I don't know about you, but I am more of a sunny side up kind of person. I want to be happy. I want to be content with where I am. And I think part of that is by just embracing and accepting what's in front of you and finding a way to make it work and enjoy it, and enjoy those little simple things. So I guess the answer to the question of the benefits it has on being a homemaker for children and husband, for me, for our family, I feel like there are so many benefits, mostly to do with the fact that I myself personally am less stressed and less anxious when I am at home. That's just like a base answer. Like, I am just a home bird. I love being at home. I love creating a space for my family to come home to, creating a meal, spending hours in the kitchen. I love cleaning now, kind of, sort of. Okay, maybe not love. I am getting used to cleaning, thanks to my cleaning system. And I'm enjoying not being stressed about it because there's a plan for it. I actually do enjoy doing laundry. I enjoy doing the budget. I just like being at home. I like making this house flow better. It is not yet a perfectly well-oiled machine. I don't think I've got this like down yet. I am most 100% still learning how to make this into a perfectly run home, and I don't suppose I'll ever reach perfection, but I'm gonna keep trying to make everything flow better, reduce those tiny little stresses that might butter up against our daily life. And that's something I enjoy taking out of the way for everybody if I can. For me, the top benefit, probably far outweighing any other benefit of being a full-time homemaker, is having the time to spend with my family, to build stronger connections and relationships, to be there to help them and coach them with their emotions, to help them through problems at school or problems at work, to be able to listen and be present, because we're not always just crossing paths with each other on the way to a new activity or to bed. And the other main benefit I see is that I get to cook amazing food that's really nourishing and full of love for my family. That is something that is hugely important to me. There is nothing I love more than spending a morning preparing food and making things from scratch, and making sure that my children are filled with good vitamins and minerals and fats and just all the things that I need for daily life, as well as making it fun and interesting. And I never wanted it to be boring, and I never wanted it to be like repeated convenience foods or takeaways. That's not something I wanted for my family. There is a book called The Life-Giving Home by Sally and Sarah Clarkson, which if you haven't read it, please get yourself a copy. I think this is one worth owning, so pop it on your Christmas wish list and ask someone to purchase it for you. Buy it used, get it from the library, whatever, but please read The Life-Giving Home by Sally and Sarah Clarkson. It does come from a Christian angle, but I do feel like it's relevant to absolutely everybody. I dip into this often when I'm feeling discouraged, and it always gives me some encouragement for daily life. It's got quite a lot of practical tips on how to make the home even more of a place of belonging and becoming. And I just think that that whole ethos that it has is so positive and uplifting and just nourishing and deep, and it's just wonderful. So please grab yourself a copy, maybe make that something that you read over the summer months. And well, I say summer months, but actually by the time you hear this, it will be the middle of August. So maybe get it for the autumn, when actually it will be the perfect autumn read, because autumn in itself is just, it's just lovely and rich. And so is this book. So, and it sets itself out in months. So it's a really like dippable book. You could pick a chapter that is this month and read it, and it will be relevant to what's going on. So let me give you some quotes. Let me give you a bit of a quote from the chapter called A Life-Giving Legacy. At the end, it says, "What greater joy can there be than to create a holding place for all that is sacred in life? Faith, love, God, purpose, beauty, relationships, creativity, fun, the art of life, safety, shelter, feasting. To foster education in many realms of interest, a classroom of life where foundations of morality are taught and modelled and wisdom is learned. To build an environment that contains everything necessary for people of all generations, from babies to the elderly, to live healthy and well in community. Building well is a long process. None of us will ever be perfectly wise or mature or loving. Creating a life-giving home, then, is a long process, taken one step, one season at a time. In the process, I've found the home itself becomes wiser and more valuable. Home should be the very best place ever to be, and the gathering of all of us together, including friends and those who would share our belonging together, should be the place we feel most at home." And it keeps going like that the whole time. It's inspiring and it's encouraging, and I would recommend it's at your bedside at all times for days and moments you feel discouraged. So I hope that answered that first question. So on to the second one, which is, please can you talk about balancing being a present mum and homemaking, something I struggle with? And I cannot agree with you more. Balancing those two things together is almost impossible, actually. It's not something that's easy to balance. But also at the same time, I just think perhaps that we need a different way of looking at the home and homemaking and parenting as not two separate things, but kind of more of a mesh interwoven. And kind of, I think also it depends on the season of your parenting. So if you are parenting little ones, homemaking kind of needs to take a backseat, because when you have tiny ones under the age of 3, it's all in. You need to keep them safe. You need to keep them nourished and fed. You need to keep your body fed if you're breastfeeding, and you need to stay relaxed, and you need to ask for help. I'm sure I mentioned that in a previous episode. If you have under 3s, you need to get the team in. You need to see what you can do to get some help. And if you can't get help, then you need to just loosen your standards a bit when it comes to the cleanliness of your home. And that needs to be okay. I don't think there's any other way of doing that. But otherwise, going forwards, it has been my experience that if you teach the children young how to help you with jobs in the house, that your life going forwards will be easier, especially with cooking. I spend so much of my time in the kitchen. So much. So the way that we have it set up now is that one or the other of the children will be helping me, or they'll be going and doing things in different hotspots in the house and occupying themselves. There is a spot in almost every single room where there is something for them to do. So in the kitchen, they can either be helping me with the cooking, or they'll be on the kind of dining room table. There's a huge amount of craft supplies in a basket, or books for colouring, things like that they know where they are, how to get them out, that they are able to do that. Sometimes they need help with sort of setting up an activity. And I kind of love our house because we do have a kitchen diner. So it's a bigger space that I can kind of see them doing some kind of artistic endeavour and be getting on with doing the dishwasher or the laundry or something at the same time. And I can make sure that they're okay and that they know what they're doing, and we can have a bit of a chat, or we can all listen to music together, and it's quite lovely. Or I'm doing laundry upstairs. There's a huge basket of Lego next to me, or sometimes they're helping me with the folding or taking things off the clothes horse. Or otherwise, if wherever I am, they usually like to be near me. If I'm in the garden, I just make sure that they've got an activity to do beforehand. So if I'm doing the mowing or something like that, then they'll be making a potion in the mud kitchen. So I guess step 1 is make sure your home is equipped to have these little kind of hotspots or zones where the kids know what to do, and really start teaching them that from a young age. And definitely start at a young age teaching them skills to help you in the kitchen, so that they can just come alongside you if they want a little bit of extra mummy time, or just to feel close to you. The key part of this question is the use of the word present. Being a present mum and homemaking at the same time. There is nothing that is more important than my kids coming to ask me a question. So if it doesn't matter what I'm doing, unless, for example, something's going to burn, or I don't know, set on fire, electrocute me, something where there might be a fatality, that might be more important than their question. But for the majority of times, if I can put something down and stop, look them in the eye, listen to them, listen to their questions, that's my main focus. Obviously, I'm a human. I don't always get that totally right. I fail all the time, but I try to make that my most important thing. I think for anyone that's quite a visual person, I think writing out your priorities can be really helpful. So then if you know that it goes kids' emotional needs, kids' nutritional needs, and then a clean house, then I think that can really help when you're responding to different situations. I think there's 2 other things to factor in there, and one is self-care, that very overused phrase these days, and the other one is nurturing the relationship you have with your other half, both of which are very, very important, and I think probably come before any kind of outside of the home things. But I think it's quite a personal thing deciding where those fit in there. It depends on how your relationship with either of those things, yourself or your partner, is going, and how much time you need to put in there. But I would say that I don't know, if you are making sure your kids are emotionally well and well fed, that will help both your self-care and your relationship with your other half so much. The last point on this question is that in order to check your presentness, I would check your relationship with your phone. And I think that just needs to be something that everyone is cautious of in 2023. It's really easy to fall into really bad habits. And I would just urge you to check how you're spending your time on your phone or with other devices around the house. If you are like overly like interested in gaming or watching the TV or checking Instagram and you are ignoring your children, I feel like that's a really dangerous place to be. And I do feel like any of those distractions can really rob us of being present with our children. I hope that was a helpful answer. I feel like there's so much more to say here. Perhaps there'll be a whole other episode about balancing everything, because I know it's so difficult. But I know also everyone has a different situation. So it's a difficult thing to speak to. But I hope those things were general enough that they can be applied to everyone listening. And the last question is, what things do you have around the house that you love and literally improve your life? I love this question. And this feels like either a whole video or a whole podcast to answer this question, because there are so many things around the house that I love and do improve my life. As mentioned in previous episodes, the new can opener, amazing. I can be opening a can with no sharp edges at the end and keep chopping. And it just gives me great joy every single time I use it. I guess I could also say cast iron pancake pan, my cordless vacuum, my laminator. I have a label maker, the Dymo label maker. I love that thing. I don't have heaps of kitchen gadgets, actually. My kitchen gadgets are really quite simple. I love like my microplane grater that I use every single day. It's a really like top quality one. I don't think it's hugely expensive, but a microplane grater I use for like nutmeg or grating chocolate or lemon zest, and that seems to happen every single day. Garlic, I do it on there. I don't have a garlic press. I try and get things that I can use for multiple things, and I don't have loads of big machines. One of the ones I do have is a Vitamix. Mum bought that for me a few years ago to make green smoothies. And it turns out you can use that for so many other things. I grind flax seeds in it and I grind oats into flour. It is so powerful and wonderful. So I use that a lot for kind of like food processing needs. So I don't have a food processor. I don't have like a traditional stand mixer. I don't have an ice cream maker. I do have like a kind of Kenwood mixer, like a handheld mixer. And I do have like what am I trying to say? Like a stick blender. That's what I'm trying to say. Stick blender is amazing. That does most of my like fine blending things that I'm not like are not huge enough to fit in the Vitamix, which actually, again, that oddly gets used so much. Stick blender, absolutely wonderful. What else do I have? A balloon whisk. I mean, I use that every single day. And I got from IKEA, they had, I don't know if they still have it, but they had quite a large, like paddle, flat wooden paddle flipper thing, which I use every single day. Again, it's quite wide in comparison to quite a lot of the like flipper spatulas are quite slim, and that one's quite wide. So it's great for pancakes, and it's just great for a lot of things. It would seem it makes the job a bit shorter and easier. What else? A really good peeler is absolutely worth investing in. I think this list could last a really long time. Maybe send me a message if you would like to see that be a video. I feel like that would make a great YouTube video. Talking of YouTube videos, I recently did a YouTube video, which I'm guessing probably quite a lot of you have seen. I have a YouTube channel called Alyssa Evelyn, and on there I did a homemaking video, kind of to introduce this podcast to my YouTube audience, but also kind of the other way around as well. So if you haven't seen that, you can see inside my home and a bit of my day-to-day life. I will warn you that for some of you, this is going to be life-changing, that you see someone on YouTube only doing washing up and filling the dishwasher and doing the laundry and folding things and sorting out the tablecloth. And for some of you, that's going to be a revelation, because all you've seen on homemaking videos are people that are like, have loads of money and are ultra organized, or are in a phase of their life where in fact they have a lot more time for creativity, and they're like making epic floristry arrangements, or like making their bed pristine, or starching their sheets or something like that. I am not in that phase of my life yet. Perhaps I will be. Perhaps I inspire or aspire to be in that phase one day. But I hope for some of you out there, and I've had some lovely comments to say it makes you feel a lot more normal to see someone just doing that and not like making really cute cupcakes that look like frogs. I don't really have time for that. I'm kind of like a really high quality, nutrient dense, make the same things again and again, cook, and every single day I load the dishwasher twice and I do a load of laundry. So yeah. Next thing on my list to talk to you about is we have still had rain in England for like weeks now. This is not quite the summer I think any of us had in mind, and it is right now, as I look out the window, about 19 degrees centigrade and rainy. Just not like heavy rain, just kind of like misty wetness. And with this kind of weather comes the kind of inside-outside dance of doing laundry in England in the summertime. Usually I'd say this was mostly like spring and autumn, but this year it happens to also be in July. So quite often you will find me putting laundry out at 7:30 only to take it in at 11 o'clock because I know there's going to be a shower, or putting it out on the line, it showering immediately and then not taking it in because what's the point? Because maybe it'll either stay wet the rest of the day or it will in fact get dry, because who knows what the weather's going to do. It's this sort of funny little dance. And actually, there are some older ladies who I know, my mother-in-law specifically, who I can think of. Somehow she mostly dries outside. She lives in the Midlands as well, which are notoriously wet. She just has this like nose for knowing when things are good to go out on the line and not, and how long it's going to take. I suppose it's made easier by the fact she's one person and therefore has a lot less laundry, and so perhaps she just finds that one day in the week where it's definitely going to be sunny. But for me, with so many loads, it is a challenge. So I've got 2 clothes horses inside and they are very well used, and on weeks lately I've just had to use the dryer a bit, which is quite unusual for the summer months for me. But there we go. Then another thing I wanted to talk to you about is I have re-seasoned my cast iron pans. I was using them the other day and noticed like the bottom of one of the fried eggs going a little bit black, which is just like not ideal, not something that you want. Cast iron is a sort of kind of strange one. We didn't grow up with it in my house. I think it's something that's not particularly English, although correct me if I'm wrong. Send me a DM and tell me you've been using cast iron for ages and you live in England. But I think it's quite a kind of like American tradition. And yeah, it's something that I've really enjoyed using. I use a cast iron frying pan to make my pancakes and fry eggs in. And then I got like a slightly deeper one to make a Dutch baby in. And I love that as well for making kind of like a crustless quiche situation. But yes, they kind of lost their seasoning a bit. I think just maybe they were soaked for too long. You're not supposed to soak clean them. Or perhaps someone put a little bit of acid in there when they shouldn't, not me. So they needed re-seasoning. So I watched the Rajiv Surendra video about cast iron care. It's absolutely fantastic. I felt very confident at the end of that video that I knew what to do and that it was easy and enjoyable. And it was. It took me a little while, but it was absolutely fine. And it's not the first time I've re-seasoned, but it's the first time I've not felt like it was like super stressful and that it was a long, lovely, slow job. So thank you, Rajiv. And then I also wanted to tell you, I cleaned the oven. Oh my gosh. So I don't know how this works in other countries around the world, and I suppose it depends on what kind of oven you have, how often you use it, but our oven is used very heavily. It's a kind of old, I think it's a Belling, which I've never even heard of. It's in a built-in kitchen which was here when we bought the house. It is probably not as I would choose because I think our kitchen was probably put in by someone who didn't love to cook. So it's not like a great oven. It doesn't like cook hugely evenly, but it does work. So I'm grateful for it. But yeah, it needed a lot of love and cleaning, but I think usually, I mean, I don't know, it's not something I've spoken lots to other people, but either people just sort of let it get crusty and accept that's the way it is, or you pay like 70 to £100 for somebody to clean it professionally with a load of chemicals. And I don't think I was satisfied with either of those things. So I found out a couple of years ago that you could kind of like, if you've got like a glass doored oven, that you get all those kind of like browny, orangey, I guess it's like when the fat spits up at the glass, bits kind of, it can get like really caked on that glass. And no matter how many YouTube videos I watched or blog posts I read about natural ways to clean it, that stuff was not coming off. So I found out that you can get like a scraper razor cleaner thing. So that's what I have to clean my glass now, and it is miraculous thing. So it's just this kind of, I don't know, like 3 or 4 inch long thing that you hold, and you push up a little razor thing. It's super sharp, and you kind of scrape it along, and you scrape off all of that black gunky bit on your oven glass door. Now, obviously, that doesn't work if you've got some kind of fancy coating, but mine got to the point where it was so disgusting and nothing was getting that off that I was quite desperate and in need of a solution. And it has worked like a charm. So I now just spend about half an hour every so often scraping it off. I also, in the process, managed to like deep clean the bottom tray, so that almost looks completely brand new. I just used a kind of like wire, what is that called? Like a wire cleaning thing. What is that called? Like a little wire mesh thing. I don't know. Anyway, it's just metal wire mesh, and I just scrubbed that all over the bottom. That got that really clean, and I think that worked for the tray because it didn't seem to have a coating on, it didn't seem to scratch it, so that some kind of magic happened. So that also looks almost completely new. And then I went through the process of putting in a new light bulb. So the last time I did that, I've done it once before on that oven, you have to like unscrew the back plate. There's just 4 screws. It was actually very easy. And then twist off the like oven light cap, take out the light bulb, replace the light bulb, and then screw it all back on. And it's one of those things that feels like a really big job, and you put it off and put it off and put it off. And then I've had so much joy since I did it. I actually had to do it twice because the first light bulb I got kind of blew, and then it didn't explode. It just sort of turned on and then turned off. And then I took it out and it looked all cloudy and like all the bits were not connected. It did say it was an oven light bulb, but clearly wasn't quite fit for purpose. And then found another brand, put that one in, and has been absolutely fine. So I have loved cooking in my oven, which is good because even though it's July and reasonably I shouldn't be using the oven very much because it should be too hot to use it, I'm actually using it all the time, and we're making lots of comforting autumnal foods like lasagna and spatchcock chicken, which we had today for lunch. So, but it's been a great joy because I can actually see the food as it's cooking, which is great. So I can tell if it's done without having to open it. And that like tiny stressor of not being able to see it is lifted. And in fact, it gives me a little bit of extra joy. And it's one of those things that can just, it was worth doing. And it probably took me like, I don't know, an hour and a half to 2 hours to do the whole job of sorting out the oven. But I shan't have to do that again for probably another 6 months if I want to sort of maintain it. Anyway, so there's a little encouragement to clean out your oven when you have a couple of spare hours, and that's really only if you actually like to cook. I also have this theory, and I suppose it's not my own theory, that even if something isn't like our kitchen isn't how I would have it, we bought the house with the kitchen in it, it's a bit naff, things are a bit crooked, things don't work totally optimally, but it does work. I'm really grateful for it. But I wasn't really loving it in the way that I should, and I realized that you do need to love everything that you've got, whether you love it and it's something you chose and spent time and money on or not. And only in loving the things that you do already have will new things come into your life. And then also next time I do get a new oven at some point, I will know exactly how to clean that oven because I practiced on one I didn't love as much. The other day I went to the library. I've been using the library again a bit more recently, just partly because they do this kind of like summer scheme for kids at school. So if you read like 6 books, you get a certificate. So my son's really into that. You get a sticker each book you read and you have to like write a little bit about it and rate it. And it's very cute. But it's meant that I've gone in, and every time I go into the library, I'm always inspired to get some kind of book. I love books. I, in fact, should probably count them, but I reckon there's probably about 25 books by my bedside table. It increases so fast. And yet I make basically like 0 time for reading actual books. I need to find a way of making time to read books because it's something I don't prioritize well at all. So we have talked about like finding like evenings where we just read books, but because my husband's not a huge reader, it just doesn't seem to happen. So I guess perhaps this just isn't the like big reading phase of my life, and that's okay. But I do have all these books stacked next to my bed, and now I've got even more because I went to the library and I got a whole bunch of like cleaning books. I find it so interesting what books they do and don't have at the library. I find it very political. There's no books about homeschooling. Like 0. There's hardly any books about homemaking. There are books about allotments and creating a perfect garden, but there's no permaculture books. But there are guides and guides and guides about how to clean your home from very different perspectives and different ways. And so I got books about how to clean your home with like in a green way. I got like the ultimate guide to cleaning your home. And then I got this one called, I've got it right next to me. It's called A Monk's Guide to a Clean House and Mind by Shoukei Matsumoto. And I just was like, okay, that's interesting. And clearly I typed the word clean into the search bar when I was looking. But like, I've only read the first page, but it was so interesting. It was such a different perspective on cleaning, and I'm really excited to read the rest of it. It says, I'm a Buddhist monk at Komyoji Temple in Kamiyacho, Tokyo, Japan. A monk's day begins with cleaning. We sweep the temple grounds and gardens and polish the main temple hall. We don't do this because it's dirty or messy. We do it to eliminate the gloom in our hearts. When you visit a temple, you feel a blissful tension in the tranquil space. The gardens are well tended and spotless without a single leaf on the ground. Inside the main temple hall, you naturally sit tall and feel alert. These things serve to calm the mind. We sweep dust to remove our worldly desires. We scrub dirt to free ourselves of attachments. The time we spend carefully cleaning out every nook and cranny of the temple grounds is extremely fulfilling. We live simply and take time to contemplate the self, mindfully living each moment. It's not just monks who need to live this way. Everyone in today's busy world needs to do it. Life is a daily training ground, and we are each composed of the very actions we take in life. If you live carelessly, your mind will be soiled, but if you try to live conscientiously, it will slowly become pure again. If your heart is pure, the world looks brighter. If your world is bright, you can be kinder to others. And that is the first page of that book. I have no idea what's in the rest of this book. I think there's kind of like a area by area example of how you can clean things, as most cleaning books are, but I think probably the most important bit is that first page is cleaning for everybody is a way of clearing our minds. Honestly, I feel like I'm only just starting to believe that's true, and I think that's for several reasons. I think I was sort of conditioned, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, to think that cleaning wasn't something I needed to do. I never really saw mum doing it. It wasn't something on her priority list. It wasn't something she really made or had time for, maybe. And then secondly, when I got married, my husband really liked cleaning, so I kind of just let him do it. We were both working at the time. And then when we had kids, having young kids, as I mentioned, is so all-encompassing that when you get a little moment and you do some cleaning, it feels like you're barely scratching at the surface. Like you are, I always said, like, it feels like I'm like trying to swim up to get a breath, but like I just can't get there ever. Like, and take a nice deep breath and really enjoy like the whole house being cleaned, because you're always just almost there, but like never quite actually getting there and really enjoying it like that. And I think I'm just about getting to a place where I'm kind of like, I think having my home executives box makes it feel doable, makes it feel calm and peaceful and like I'm on top of things. And it means I'm able to do more of those like nitty gritty jobs like cleaning the oven and reseasoning the pan. So there is definite ability to remove the gloom in our hearts by cleaning, but I do think sometimes it can make us gloomier if we're in a season of life where we can't clean everything or it doesn't always stay clean. I think there's like a little bit of reframing and letting go that we need to kind of learn in those seasons, and that's very difficult. Never in my wildest dreams did I think when I started a homemaking podcast that I would talk so much about cleaning, nor would I come into kind of an understanding of how complex and personal and emotional even cleaning can be for some people, as well as how deeply linked homemaking and cleaning are in most people's heads. For me, I always imagined homemaking as like creating this beautiful home space with good food and snuggly blankets and lots of books. But I never really thought about it as being a clean space. And for a lot of people, cleaning is like at the very top of the list of importance for homemaking and a good home. But like I said, it's so different for everybody. Everyone has their own different idea of what constitutes a home and what constitutes a clean home. And that can be very complicated. It can cause arguments. It can cause people to disagree and just not even be friends with other people because either their homes are too clean or not clean enough, or it's quite a complicated thing. And I never really imagined that. So I was thinking about how I wanted to end this series because I feel like last words are important and I just didn't know what to say. I wrote down so many different ideas of what I wanted to say, and I feel like there are so many things I just want to get on top of my rooftop and yell out loud to everybody at the top of my lungs. But I actually wanted to like slow it down to something practical, be less preachy, probably still a little bit preachy, realistically, so sorry, but I wanted to talk about something I saw the other day on a YouTube video from the Cottage Fairy, who, if you don't follow her, she makes some very lovely videos. I don't follow heaps of people on YouTube, but she is someone who's a very deep thinker, much like my brother, and is always happy to share her opinion and soul with everybody in a really beautiful way. So she made a video about monotasking, and it hit hard on something that has been very much on my mind. I think I've probably been talking about it in some previous podcasts, even without knowing that might be the word I needed to use. So monotasking is the opposite of multitasking. It means doing one thing at a time. And she was suggesting that in our modern society, because we also feel like we should always be doing many things at once. So, for example, doing the washing up whilst listening to a podcast. For example, watching the TV and ironing. It means actually watching the film without scrolling Instagram at the same time. And it means just doing one thing at a time really, really well and then starting up a new task. Now, one way I've really experienced this lately in a really positive way is creating my home executive box. Please go back to the episode where I talked about that if you want more information. But basically, it means that instead of my mind being on I'm hoovering and I'm cooking something and I'm also dusting or something, actually trying to do many things all at once, I open my box, I take out one card, I do the item on that card, and then I put it back in and pick out another one. And there's something about that takes out so much of the stress of the doing of the cleaning. If cleaning is not something that you kind of do naturally and easily and without thinking about it, that is. Just to say that, because a lot of people have got into a cleaning routine where they don't even have to think about it. So for me, that has been marvelous, because before I would be trying to do all these things at once but not doing any one of them particularly well, and instead now focusing just on one task at a time and doing it really well means that I'm less stressed, the job gets done better and arguably faster over time. One of the things she said in the video was, as a child, I could play for hours without worrying about how productive I was being. And there was something in that phrase that really captured me. And I think it's something perhaps that we all yearn for and we don't let ourselves do. There is some science behind the fact that actually when we think that we're multitasking, actually we're switching really rapidly from one task to the next, and we are single tasking, but we're just sort of trying to layer them into each other. And so it's actually not very good for you. Actually, people can't multitask. We're actually just always monotasking, but just trying to switch really quickly from one to the other. And I think that kind of goes in line with that kind of scrolling, switching from 1 second to another, a different person, a different story. And I think it's probably causing a lot of our brains some serious harm. And I think I noticed that about myself. And if I'm truly honest, probably a lot of my how do I say this in the right way? I have been struggling with depression on and off for a few years, and I think there's several reasons for that. One, I definitely have some kind of seasonal affective depression, which means that gloomy days I am not as happy as sunny days. And I really, really struggle in about February to April when it's been dark for a long time. And even though I can sometimes see the light coming, that doesn't do anything to lift that mood anyway. There's a whole other podcast in talking about mental health and homemaking and my experience with those things. But there was something in this idea of monotasking that got me really emotional, because I feel like my brain is constantly distracted. It's been taught to be distracted, and that distraction is a positive thing from a really young age. And that when we are feeling bored, that means it's time to like fill our brains again with information or ideas, and that's a positive thing. And I think realistically, when I think about it, one of my main troubles in my life is filling my brain too much with information and not taking enough time to properly absorb the information I've heard or listened to. And there's just a lack of processing time. And I want so desperately to get to a place where I can do one thing at a time and actually just be happy with my brain. I think that's the thing that she mentioned in the video, is that it's quite scary when you start monotasking because you are left with your own brain. And that is an absolutely terrifying prospect to me. I feel like my brain is still a big jumble and I struggle to switch it off and organize it. And I just don't necessarily like listening to my own brain when it's left in silence. I still don't know whether we're supposed to be as isolated as we all are. I suppose that's another conversation here, is we are all really isolated from each other. I would love to live in a community where I was doing things alongside other people, so then my brain wasn't as isolated as it is. We're isolated and yet filled with conversation, and it's an odd, unbalanced thing. I don't think our lives were supposed to look like this, but I did write this, I think I did it as an Instagram post, a piece called My Brain is Like a Desk, and it was about a piece about stress and how my brain felt. And I think, quite frankly, it still feels like this on most days. There's not that much peace in my mind, and I did go to a doctor a while ago. He told me to create some mindfulness and meditation practices, which I thought that was a pretty cool GP. I was quite happy with that as an answer, but I just really didn't have a clue where to start. And at the time I was just quite sleep deprived and had no free time. So anyway, the post goes something like this. My brain is like a desk. There are many papers on this desk, new envelopes to open, things freshly printed, bills, photographs, lists, drawings, ideas scribbled on scrap paper, old papers taken out for reference that need to go back where they belong, piles of notes. Usually I'm pretty good at filing those papers, working out where they should go. I have enough time to sort through them. Maybe it takes me longer to organise than some other people, or maybe I have a different way of doing it, but that's okay. I usually do a pretty good job. But lately those papers haven't been filed. Instead, they've been mounting on top of each other, some falling off the desk accidentally. Mostly they're just being shuffled around each day whilst I try and find a particular one. Often I can't find what I need, or it takes a really embarrassingly long time. Most of those papers contain happy news, good ideas, lovely memories, but there's just too many of them. It's getting to the point of overwhelm, of seeing them pile up and up and up, and I'm hoping they don't topple all over the floor, or that I haven't missed something marked urgent somewhere in those huge stacks. It's not that I need to stop the new papers coming in. Most are regular letters, some is spam, some things are new, but the stuff that would normally keep my desk pretty and interesting and varied. And then there are essays, thoughts about big things that are part written or written by someone else that I need to read through and work out what my opinion is. And of course there are newspapers. Thankfully, there aren't too many of those on my desk because I don't usually let them in often. They're difficult to file. I don't need a new filing solution, all I need is time, so I can tidy that desk up so I can find the papers I need at the time I need them, so that I don't accidentally pick up the wrong piece of paper, so that it doesn't get so high I'm forever buried in it. This is what stress feels like. I'm quite proud of that written piece. I think it illustrates in a funky kind of metaphor how stress feels to me. Every time I need to explain stress to somebody else, that's what I always think of that piece that I wrote. I imagine that a lot of you mums with young children can really relate to that, especially those of you who had young children in lockdown, which is when I wrote that. But I think this really pertains to this monotasking. I think the more papers you take into that desk, the more artworks, the more ideas, the more deep thoughts that you just don't need, when you don't need anymore, I think it gets overwhelming, and I think your brain either wants to bury itself or it can feel like you're drowning in papers. And I think we're told that it's a good thing, but I really don't think it is. I think this monotasking idea is absolutely wonderful, and I think that there are some habits that I need to break. I've already done a good job of reducing, as I mentioned in that piece. Like, I don't listen to news. I'm really careful about things I read and watch. But still, clearly it's too much for me, and I need to simplify even more. And I dare say that a number of you listening are also in that same boat. So to end this on a happy note, after that very deep chat about stress of life, I would love for all of you to have a little bit of homework for the foreseeable month to 6 weeks until I am back again. And that is just to work out where you're multitasking, that you can shift it to a monotasking thing and be present and really engage with the task at hand, whether that is choose to watch something that you really want to watch and actually watch it without doing anything else at the same time. Maybe it's to pick up a craft project and let your brain go through the difficulty of listening to itself whilst you're doing the craft project and get into this kind of meditative phase that you need to get into, that your brain needs to get into to actually rest. There is rest outside of sleep, and quite frankly, my sleep is not always that restful. I have a really crazy dream life that is always very active. So it would be good to feel that I could let myself sit and do some crochet without feeling like I needed to catch up on YouTube videos at the same time or do anything else. Now, I think you can probably eat at the same time as watching a movie or something like that you're not really thinking about, or maybe listen to music whilst you're washing up or something. I've mentioned that in previous episodes, where it's lovely to do things that you've already done once so your brain has less to process. So especially for people that are predisposed to depression, anxiety or stress, that if you're watching movies you've already watched, or you're listening to music that you love so much, it's a lot less for your brain to process and figure out, and I think it's a lot easier. So is that positive? I hope that's a positive kind of end to this podcast, to this series. I would love to hear how you all get on with that, and hopefully we can all help each other a little bit. I appreciate that message is not for everybody, and we are all in different phases of life, in different seasons of life, and that there is an ebb and a flow to the stresses, and that there are times when you're not stressed, and there are times when you are, and there are times when it's too much, and there are times when it's not enough, and that's okay. And to be kind to yourself and just really start listening to what your mind needs. So there you have it, the end of series 1 of the English Homemaker. I hope you really liked that. Please, as always, go and give me a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, or share it on Instagram. Talk to a friend about the podcast. I love hearing what you think as well. Please send me a DM on Instagram or a comment, or head on over to my blog and comment there. There are so many different ways to get in touch, and I would love to hear what you think about the podcast, because podcasts are great. You guys can listen to it, consume it, and I will never know what you think unless you tell me. And so I will assume that you all love it, and and that you would like more. I keep getting more and more downloads, so that means more and more of you are subscribing and signing up to automatic downloads, which is a lovely thing to see. And I'm so happy still that so many people from all over the world are listening to this podcast and are interested. And yeah, I hope going forwards that you join me for season 2. I will be so excited to come back, but I'm really looking forward to a little bit of a break. There's so much I've talked about in the last several months on this podcast that I just need to let settle and sit and file away. And I imagine it may be the same for you too. So do go and have a really wonderful rest of your day, rest of your week, rest of the month, and I look forward to seeing you in early autumn. Cheerio, bye.